Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters of the Week video. I thought I would mix one of these in here while I wrap up my series for Cryptids and Monsters. I'm going to do essentially one more after this, one of your past suggestions, and then that's it. I'll wrap it up for this go around and start focusing on other stuff, so I'll just give it a little bit of rest. This random page that I came across on the Cryptids website suggested something pretty interesting in that A, it happened here in the US, and then B, there's an actual first-hand account of it to read. So the person that this experience happened to happens to have a first-hand account that they wrote on the paranormal.about.com website, which I'll include the link for it below. So that's quite rare, so we hardly ever have anything like that happening where the actual person that this encounter occurred with describes it in their own detail. So very, very interesting stuff. And what I'm referring to is the cryptid known as the Georgia Raptor, which you're looking at a drawing of here. Not much information really to showcase with regards to this cryptid, mainly because there seems to just be only one encounter, which is the aforementioned first-hand encounter from the gentleman that I'm going to describe here in a minute. But I'll try to present everything that I can, and then it'll be interesting to see if there's any further encounters with this creature in the future. So what was this Georgia Raptor? Well, it was a cryptid that was encountered very recently, in the sense that it was in July 2008 to be exact. So again, unlike any of the other cryptids I'm talking about, sometimes they go back so many generations. In this case, this is pretty recent. And it has to do with a young man. The age is unknown with regards to this because he did not state his age, but presumably he's a youngish type man because the way the encounter occurred, he was hunting with his grandfather somewhere in the Georgia woods. So here's everything that occurred. So on that fateful night back in July 2008, specifically around 3:30 or so o'clock, by the way, it was actually July 25th if you want to get down to the very, very specific date. This young man stated that he was with his grandpa hunting around his grandpa's area, I guess wherever that land is that his grandpa owned there in Georgia. He made it seem like he has like a pretty large set of acres of land to do so. And it seemed like this was just another hunting trip of sorts, because this young man has stated that he's done several trips like this with him in the past, and they both enjoy hunting and fishing, and as he described it, just being out there in nature. But in this case, this particular hunt again took place again in the dead of night, 3 o'clock to 3:30 a.m. He stated that they were just crossing the several parts of the woods, and in specific they happened to come across a tiny little rocky road that just happens to be near an area where they usually see deer. So there they are, dead of night. Imagine things being quite silent in this type of hunt. Imagine them also being quite stealthy as well, like not talking much, not trying to scare any of the animals around for their hunt. He did describe there were the typical sounds associated with the night around his area. Made it seem like it's more along the lines of maybe the occasional owl, the crickets, the rustling of some night creatures, maybe like a snake, anything along those lines. Nothing like during the day, but still imagine just during the night these unusual sounds. And then something really stood out. Suddenly, the way he described it, they both heard a quote-unquote unusual noise that they've never heard before on any of their hunting trips. This stopped them dead in their tracks. Like they basically just stood still and then tried to hear what it was that this was causing this particular, like this very strange noise. So much so that the boy stated that his grandpa put like his finger in front of his mouth to kind of showcase, hey, let's quiet down, let's not make any more movement, any more noise until we figure out what this is. And it's kind of hard to describe because even this boy, has a hard time describing what that noise was. The closest he could state that it was something unique, something different, something creating a lot of noise, but because of the fact that it was also pretty dark, they could not pinpoint where this noise was coming from. And then lo and behold, as they were listening to the sound of something pushing its way through the bushes, like you could imagine like an animal, the way the sound of a forest makes whenever it's walking across, let's say, a forest, a sea of leaves on the ground. You know how it makes that rustling sound? Well, imagine something like this also doing the same thing with regards to its environment. And then lo and behold, right out of the blue, 150 yards right in front of them, they described something pretty big, not too large but not too small, coming out and crossing the road in plain sight. So this gave them the opportunity to see what it was that was causing that unique noise, animalistic noise, and it was something straight out of a movie. It was crazy. The way that this boy described it was, if you can believe it, it looked like it was just like a raptor from, this is the way he describes it, the popular Jurassic Park movies. So there it was, this thing, this Georgia raptor, all out in the open, just looking around right there in the middle of the night, 150 yards away in the middle of that road. Both of them, of course, immediately just froze. You could just imagine something along the lines of, you see something from Jurassic Park, those deadly raptors that were in the film, all of a sudden in real life standing in front of you, even if at a distance. So clearly they both wisely just froze, but it gave them some time, in this case the boy, to describe what he saw. He said this was something that looked like a raptor. It had a long, stiff tail. Clearly it walked on 2 feet. It had shorter arms, and then very distinctly it had a huge claw on both of its feet, i.e. just like the raptors in the movies had, and then it had smaller claws on its smaller arms. And the way that this creature looked like, especially the powerful legs that it had, it gave him the idea that this thing could run pretty fast, so they weren't going to make any sudden movements to try to raise its attention. But almost like a page from a movie, this thing, this Georgia raptor, kind of sensed that there was something nearby, in this case the boy and his grandpa, because he stated that it raised its head, and even if it couldn't see them, it could almost smell them, like it was raising its head in their direction. Probably at this point they were still within the forest, just under the blackness of, let's say, all the covered leaves and the trees and the foliage there, but it could still sense that they were there, like something was there nearby. In this case, it being them too, and it could almost smell them. So there it was, kind of guessing like what to do at that point. It made a sound like it was almost sniffing the air. It made those sounds that they heard earlier, those animalistic sounds coming through the forest, and then in a quite bit of surprise, this thing, instead of pursuing what it thought was, let's say, in the distance, in this case the boy and the grandpa, in this case it just turned around and then simply ran off. The way he described it was, it ran off straight into the bushes somewhere down the road, and then it just completely disappeared. But that's it. That's the encounter. That's everything associated with the Georgia raptor, and the very, very brief encounter that these two gentlemen had back in July 25th. 2008. If you want to know what happened afterward, the boy stated that him and his grandpa, clearly at that point, they were so scared, in the sense that it's not safe to be out there that night, especially with this thing running around, that they immediately but quietly went back to their truck, and then they decided to drive home right then and there. They did talk about the encounter and what they had seen, but they decided that they weren't going to showcase anything about this to their grandma, because she lives in that area too, and they don't want to necessarily like kind of scare her, and at the same time make her think that they're acting crazy. So, but yes, that is all the information associated with the Georgia raptor. If anyone has any more info, a very, very brief info as is, but if anyone happens to know any more tales of any more sightings there around the Georgia area, no mention unfortunately about what city or what county or what local area is tied to that Georgia location, but if anyone has any clues or ideas about that and would like to share, please post those comments below. That would be really, really good to hear. But what do you guys think? an actual raptor sighting here in the US, apparently still roaming even after all these potentially millions of years. Something in terms of an actual raptor or clan of raptors coming about within the US. There is the idea too that this thing could be a long lost cousin of an animal called the Troodon. I hope I'm saying that right, but the Troodon is yet another dinosaur that lived who knows how far back, but it was the idea is that it was a descendant of one of these creatures, and that somehow, some way, it still is alive. The family of it, essentially somewhere out there in the Georgia woodlands. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.